Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our September Child Nutrition Monthly Updates and Webinar. I'm Michelle Bisbee, and I'm joined here with Sarah Platt, and we will be going over everything you need to know for this month.
So starting with our agenda, we're going to start with recent updates and program reminders for the month of September, and we'll then cover upcoming training events and finally jump into our topic for the month, which is the top 10 most common program findings. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our website in the next few days. And feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box. We'll have time at the end of this training to address any questions you may have.
So for schools that collect free and reduced meal applications, the 30-day carryover of student eligibility expires soon. Verification of free and reduced applications starts on October 1st. September claim for reimbursement, try to get that done before October 8th so that it's not considered late. You do have 60 days to file. Other than that, you will be filing for a one-time exception. We have our October food distribution program monthly order, which will be open from October 1st to October 15th. And then for the National School Lunch Program's after school snack program, on-site monitoring review is due within the first 4 weeks of operation. And there are meal pattern changes for school year 26.
Also, the October survey. So state agencies each year are required to collect free and reduced student eligibility data from each of our sponsors. And the data is based on the last operating day in October. So this month, it does look like that's October 31st. It's a Friday. This process has to be reported to us in CNP Web, and this process is called the October survey. It's really important that this information be accurate because we use this as an edit check in the CNP Web claiming system. It is also used to determine eligibility for after-school snacks and help prioritize some of the funding for FFEP as it goes to the higher free and reduced schools. Jody is doing a webinar on the October survey. It's on October 7th at 1:30, and to register for that, there's a link in the Thursday update.
All right, so some upcoming events that we have for child nutrition. We have a basic sanitation training. This is different than ServSafe on October 10th at 8:30 a.m. at Old Town High School. We do have a ServSafe exam on October 20th at 2 p.m. at the Child Nutrition Office. Registration deadline for that is October 3rd. We have our annual fall info meeting on October 23rd for 9 to 3 at the University of Maine, Orono. Registration deadline for that is October 15th. We have financial open office hours. These are monthly, on October, and this month is October 16th at 1:30. We have the Maine Farm to Institution Summit on October 14th at Colby College. And we hope everybody will join us for our very first Maine Apple Crunch Day on October 15th.
Okay, so let's move into our training topic for this month where we're going to address the top 10 most common program findings. I don't believe these are in any order, Michelle, right? Nope. Just top 10 most common program findings that we see when we're out on administrative reviews. And we'll also provide some resources and best practices to help you address them. So these are areas that we get a lot of questions about and we see as areas for improvement when we're on the reviews. This isn't a training on each of the topics. It's more just an overview of what we see and then resources to help.
So the first topic we're going to touch on is grain-based desserts. Grain-based desserts is a pretty complex topic. So like Sarah stated, this is not a training, just some things to be mindful of and followed by resources to help navigate it. Grain-based desserts at lunch, no more than 2-ounce equivalent grain-based desserts can count towards the meal pattern at lunch. So for example, if you were to offer yogurt parfaits and needed a little more grain, so you provided graham crackers with it every single day as an alternate lunch option, you would exceed the limit of grain-based desserts at lunch. Grain-based desserts at breakfast, there is no required limit. However, there are things that are excluded from being able to credit, for example, cookies, brownies, cupcakes, fruit cobblers, things like that. Grain-based desserts are never allowed in CACFP, and they are never allowed in after-school snack program except for sweet crackers such as animal crackers or graham crackers. Here are a couple of resources. This chart that you see on the left is actually included in the Connecticut resource that is linked here. That is a really thorough document that Connecticut has put together. It is wonderful. And then, of course, the Exhibit A grains chart, if you download it in color, it actually highlights the items that are considered grain-based desserts.
Okay, moving on to another common finding. I've been getting a lot of questions this school year about non-dairy milk substitutes. This slide, we're talking specifically for non-disability reasons, so preference requests. So just as a general reminder, cow's milk is a required component in our food-based menu plan because of the combination of nutrients that it provides. However, there might be times that you receive a request to provide a substitute to cow's milk. So in non-disability cases, this is optional. Your program can decide whether or not you would like to accommodate milk substitution requests. If you choose that that's something you want to do, which might be good customer service to consider. But if you do, your program does choose to do that, you must have the request in writing from the child's parent or guardian. And in that request, they need to identify the reason for the fluid milk substitute. And then the substitute that you offer may not necessarily be the one that they're requesting. And that's because the substitute that you offer must be nutritionally equivalent or superior to cow's milk. So you're going to need to do some label reading there. You will never be allowed to offer juice or water because they're not nutritionally equivalent to milk. And for another non-dairy alternative, again, you're going to have to do some label reading there. As far as I know, there are certain soy milks that do meet this criteria, but other than that, almond milk, oat milk, some other milk alternatives are not nutritionally equivalent, and you would not be offering them in this case. Again, for non-disability reasons where we are not supported by a medical statement. It is always fine to offer lactate or a lactose-free or a lactose-reduced milk product, and that's because this is still cow's milk. So it meets the nutrition criteria. It just has the lactose or the milk sugar removed from the product, and that is suitable for a child with lactose intolerance. So some resources available around non-dairy milk substitutes. We do have a training on our website. It's about 15 minutes long on the training page, specifically about this topic. And then on our lunch webpage, we have a variety of resources, including USDA memos, and then a milk substitution request form, a parent letter form, and our template medical statement that you can download and use when communicating with families about milk substitutions.
The next topic we have is monthly inventory. Monthly inventories are required. This is for all supplies purchased with child nutrition funds, food, so your components, USDA food, spices, etc., and even non-food. This includes your paper goods and your chemicals. You do not need to purchase a special program for this. An Excel spreadsheet works great for this function. Your monthly inventory is also a useful tool for managing food costs and ensuring perishable foods are not wasted. If you're keeping up with your monthly orders, you'll catch anything close to its expiration date. And maintaining monthly inventories will also help streamline your program. This not only includes your menu planning, serving, things like that, but also, completing your annual financial statement at the end of the year. Some inventory resources. The ICN has a great training on inventory management. And we also have some resources on our equipment page in regards to equipment inventory, how to track that, and how to properly label those items as well.
Okay. Moving on. So CNP Web. Keeping users current. This is really important because this is how we communicate with our schools and those operating our programs. So there are two areas in CNP Web where user information is entered and stored. One is on the sponsor information page, and that is the page that rolls over each year when you're completing the annual application to participate in our programs. That information carries over. So if there is a change, you are going to need to enter it yourself because the information from the prior year will be there. So we're seeing that that doesn't always happen when there's a change, say a superintendent change, the name or the email is not always being updated, and then therefore current administration is not receiving the information from us when we send out emails. The other place to check, because the sponsor information sheet and the users tab do not talk, they do not connect, is to check that users tab. Anybody that you see listed there does have access to your program in CNP Web. So if you're checking that out and you see the former food service director or the former superintendent, you need to contact Miles Laidlaw at our office, request the CNP Web user access form. It does need to be approved and signed by the superintendent and then sent back to our office so that that former staff person can be removed. So it's really important, not just at the beginning of the school year that this is checked, but also throughout the school year and anytime there are staff changes, because you don't want someone who's no longer affiliated with your district to have access to any of your information, the claiming, the sponsor information, any of that in CNP Web. So it's really important to keep users' contact information current. So some best practices, again, being aware of any time there's a staff change, know that that needs to be reported to us, updated in CNP Web. So you want to request that user access form. Make sure that you review all the information in that sponsor and site information sheet each year. Don't just automatically submit it, but read everything that's there. Maybe the district changed emails, that's still the same superintendent, but you have a new email address that's going to need to be updated. So just really read through everything and make sure it's correct.
All right, financial management. Oversight of school nutrition finances is very important. Reviewing the detailed general ledger monthly. You want to manage your program expenses and revenues. Tracking your per meal costs. This is really important, especially if you are serving adult meals or a la carte purchases to ensure that you're not losing money. And like we talked about before, conducting that monthly inventory. That is a huge, huge part of your finances because that is a lot of funds just sitting in a storeroom right there. We have been driving home a lot this year about setting that adult meal charge at or above your per meal cost. If you don't know what your per meal cost is, it is reported in your annual financial report. So if you do not feel like that is correct, those are numbers that have been reported by your school. So that would definitely be something you'd want to take a look at. You really want to pay attention to the detailed general ledger because you want to make sure that people that do not work in your program are not getting paid out of that program. We've seen that happen in the past. Having strong oversight is definitely something you want to make sure that you're doing. So financial management resources. Once again, ICN is a wonderful resource for any information and training. They have a great course on financial management for school nutrition directors.
I'm just going to add to that, Michelle, too, that Jody Truman in our office is another great resource as both the former food service director and now our financial specialist in the office. She's somebody that either your business office or you yourself as food service director can reach out to at any time. And she's a wealth of information. Okay, moving on to edit checks. So an edit check is referring to when you're comparing a site, so one of your schools, your daily and monthly counts of reimbursable meals, you're comparing that against the number of students you have enrolled in that school, and then also the attendance adjusted enrollment. So if you have 100 students enrolled at your school, you're probably not going to have 100 students in attendance on most days. You might have around 95 or 94, something like that. So what you're doing is you're comparing your meal counts each day to see how close it is to that attendance adjusted enrollment and overall enrollment. And you're going to look for patterns. Are there the same numbers being claimed each day? Are they in counts of 5? Are they close to enrollment or attendance adjustment enrollments? And anything that jumps out at you needs to be investigated. Those are days that would be flagged, and you need to look into why that might be. So edit checks are required, again, both daily and monthly, and they need to be done before you file your claim for reimbursement. If you're using an electronic point of service software program, you may have reports available to you. We have samples of those reports on the screen here. Notice that neither of them say edit check in their heading. So it may not be called edit check, but you can tell that the report has meal counts by day for an entire month. And because these schools here are operating traditionally, you can see the meal counts by free, reduced, or paid. If it was a special provision, you would see the total counts by day, and the system will compare it to an attendance factor. So it's really important that every month you're looking at those reports. If you don't have those reports available to you in the system that you use to do point of service meal counts, you can use an Excel form on our website that accomplishes the same thing. So it's on our lunch page under daily operations forms. And this is, again, used every month before you file the claim. When we come on site to do an administrative review, we also ask to see this as well.
Okay, so standardized recipes. This is something that I think we've seen for years. We'll ask for standardized recipes, especially when we're doing an administrative review to determining crediting, and making sure the meal pattern is being met over the review week. And a lot of times what we're given is a photocopy of what is more or less a grocery list. It's just a list of ingredients, no instructions, no further information. So as you can see, the arrow on this one, one of the first key things you need is how many servings does this recipe provide you? Um, we all we also need to see the list of ingredients in measurable terms, instructions so that your staff know how to prepare the recipe. And then we have recipe notes here. This is where you have your information about what the serving size is, how the recipe credits. You can see here that it actually tells you what size scoop exactly to use. All of this information is 100% necessary on a standardized recipe. Without this information, we cannot truly determine if it will provide you the necessary ingredients or components to credit towards the meal pattern for the course of the week. And this particular recipe came from Healthy School Meals, healthyschoolrecipes.com. And if you are looking into where you stand, for sodium limits that are dropping soon, sugar limits that are going to be decreasing over the next few years, it actually provides you with that information. Down at the bottom, it has your nutrition facts. So that is just an extra bonus step that is going to be great to have in the years coming. Some great resources for standardized recipes. We have a recorded training on our training page. Healthyschoolrecipes.com is fabulous. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recipes that are shared from schools all across the country that have crediting information already provided on them, and you can even scale them to your needs. And then there's the Child Nutrition Recipe Box from ICN.
Crediting. Well, in school meal programs, we use a food-based meal plan based on 5 food components planned out in certain quantities, depending on the grade groups that you're serving. So the process of crediting foods means that you, meaning the menu planner, you need to determine if an item counts as one of those meal components or doesn't count. It also means that you need to know how much of an item to plan. So, for example, 4 ounces of yogurt is 1 meat alternate, and that's fine at breakfast, where 1 meat alternate is the minimum amount to offer. But if you have a high school that is a 2 meat alternate for lunch, you're going to need to decide, are you going to offer more yogurt, or are you going to pair another meat alternate with that item to meet the minimum? So again, crediting is that process that is used to determine how much of a food item to offer and in what form. in order to meet the meal pattern requirements. So on the slide, there are also some common items that we tend to see when we're reviewing menus for a review, where folks just sort of maybe assume that that sausage patty they're serving is meeting the minimum requirements. And sausage is a processed meat alternate product, and without a child nutrition label, you have no idea how it credits. So you have to make sure you're purchasing a sausage patty or sausage link that has a CN label, and you're also communicating with your kitchen staff to make sure that they are purchasing the product that you need them to meet the meal pattern. Nut butter is another one. It takes 2 tablespoons of a nut butter to equal 1 meat alternate. So if your recipe that your staff is following to make that peanut butter and jelly sandwich that's offered every single day has 2 tablespoons of nut butter in it, then you are not meeting the daily minimums if it's a high school, and you're not meeting the weekly minimums if it's an elementary school. So again, as that menu planner, you need to think about what you're going to add to that sandwich to make it compliant with meal pattern. Deli meat is another processed product similar to sausage. So if it's a USDA food deli meat, you can use the USDA food fact sheets to get the crediting information to tell you how many slices of deli meat to credit as a 1 ounce equivalent. Or if it's not a USDA foods product, you would need a CN label for that. And then taco shells is another one. I think it's pretty common to just serve, say, 2 taco shells on Taco Tuesday. But if you look at the nutrition facts panel for those taco shells and you use the Exhibit A grain chart, you'll see that it takes 1 ounce of taco shells to equal a 1 ounce equivalent of grain. And if memory serves me correctly, last time I saw this, it was 3 taco shells that was needed. So again, just be aware of the resources available to you for crediting and how you're planning your menu to make sure that meal pattern is being met both daily and weekly. So in addition to the resources that we're going to talk about on the slide, I think the most important part is communication with your kitchen staff. So you as the menu planner can have a great idea and plan a menu that's compliant, but unless you're sharing that with your staff, you're maybe pre-filling production records with the specific product you want them to order, this actual serving size you want them to use, that plan won't be implemented. So communication is key, and then also following up and reviewing completed production records to make sure they followed the plan that you asked them to, and they are completing production records correctly. The food buying guide, yes, can be overwhelming, but it really has a lot of information in it for you. And if a food is listed in the food buying guide, it's a creditable food. So it's a great place to start if you're wondering if something is counting towards the meal pattern or not. And a quick, Google search online, you can find it and bookmark it and use it. And there's also an app you can put on your phone as well. If it's a processed product and you don't see it in the food buying guide, that's when the next step would be to see if that product, such as that sausage I just mentioned on the previous slide, if there's a child nutrition label or a product formulation statement, you would need that to tell you how that processed product credits. If one is not available, then it doesn't credit and you shouldn't be using it. That's just for processed products that are meat alternate or meat alternate grain items. And then USDA has these great crediting tip sheets for child nutrition programs. There's the link on the slide. Again, a basic Google search should bring them up, and they're also on our webpage. But it goes through each of the 5 food components and gives you some easy tips to help you credit some items that are commonly used in our program. So I encourage you to look at those and use them as training for your staff as well.
All right, this right here is a really, really big one, production records. When we come to do a review, we will ask for a week of production records. This is what we call your week of review. These are almost as crucial as the food out on the line itself, because this is the documentation that you are providing your students with the required components to meet the meal pattern. This right here is an example of a production record that I received as part of the administrative review, and this was the extent that it was filled out to. At this point in time, the entire right-hand side is missed, and that portion of the production record is absolutely 100% required, because as we see it right now, they did not actually prepare any food for those students. You can also see on the left-hand side, there is no serving size for your broccoli. There's no serving size for your sweet potato fries. And this just isn't good, because this is what we use to determine whether or not you're meeting the meal pattern. And as it stands, we cannot say that the school has met the meal pattern for the day or week. So please be sure, take some time to go over the next, even the past few weeks where you started school, to see if your staff are filling out these production records fully. We strongly recommend having those standardized recipes, so then you're not having to list ingredients on the production record, just saving time, saving energy, saving space. Another reminder, where you can see at the bottom, it says assorted milk. If you are going to do that, that is okay, but then you must have a milk recipe. We must be able to prove that you are offering 2 milk types at breakfast and at lunch. And you also want to be sure that you are including your condiments that you're offered for the meal as well. So just real quick recap, making sure everything you're offered is listed. If you have to have a recipe for it, please do. Making sure that everything you are offering has a serving size, and then making sure that it's complete at the end of the meal with how much you prepared, how much was left over, so that we can see that every kid was offered all the necessary components. Not only is this mandatory for you to maintain for reimbursement purposes, but this is a wonderful management tool for you as well. You can see what the kids like, what the kids don't like, if you're making too much, if you're not making enough. It's a nice, simple management tool for your kitchens.
This is where Michelle ties in nicely to the crediting slide that we just talked about, but where the menu planner or the food service director can pre-fill the menu items, the recipe or the product number that they want the kitchen to follow or order, and the actual serving size that they want them to use. So that's, right here is a great place where that menu planner can communicate with their staff, and then, definitely follow up to make sure their staff is filling them out, which they weren't doing in this case.
So there are a ton of great resources online. Not only does the ICN provide multiple options for training around production records, there's quick, no time to train lessons available online. And we also have some recorded PowerPoints on our training page as well, available to you.
Okay, moving on to meal counting. So meals must be counted at the point when they are served to students. We call this point of service, or POS. So at that stage in the meal service line where that student has a complete meal, that's when that meal is allowed to be counted. There are some unallowable meal counting practices, and that includes counting a meal before it is received by the student. So if there is a teacher coming to the cafeteria, giving you a verbal count that Johnny, Susie, and Betty are in the classroom and they're coming to take a tray for them, that is not allowable. Meals must be counted at the point that the student is receiving it. Also unallowable are tray counts. So that's counting the number of trays you're starting with before meal service, counting the trays that are left at the end of meal service. That is not allowed. Meals can only be counted as the student receives them. Also, taking a head count after meals have been served, not allowed. Attendance counts, not allowed. And serving meals to all students, such as placing them on desks. Say if you're doing a breakfast in the classroom, placing meals on the desk or the table before students arrive, and then just counting all of those meals. That's not acceptable. A student has to accept the meal before it can be counted for reimbursement. Best practices here. I always encourage you to keep meal counting responsibilities with school nutrition staff as much as possible. I understand sometimes that's really difficult with a really small staff. So it's not always possible, but if you're able to, have it be someone from school nutrition who's delivering the meals to the classroom so they can observe the students in there and the students receiving the meal. If that's not possible, then you'll need to send some sort of meal count sheet with whoever is bringing the meals to the classroom to confirm that the students are there and did accept the reimbursable meals. And then that tick sheet needs, or count sheet needs to go back to the kitchen before they can be claimed for reimbursement. And then complete those site reviews of meal counting. So everyone's familiar with the February 1st requirement to do on-site monitoring of meal service. And I think often we might just kind of do it, whiz through it, but really you can do that more than once. You don't have to wait until February 1st to conduct that. You can do it more frequently. And when you are doing it, make sure that you're going to classrooms and any place in the school building where meals are being served to students. If it's not just the traditional in the cafeteria serving, you should go to all of those areas, pre-K classrooms, breakfast in the classroom, and make sure that it's being done properly. And I think it's best practice to do that more than once a year as well.
All right, so there we have it. That was the top 10 most common program findings. Just to recap real quick, that is grain-based desserts, non-dairy milk substitutes, monthly inventory, CNP web users, financial management, claims edit check, standardized recipes, crediting meal components, production records, and meal counting. So at this time, if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, do we have any questions, Paula?
We do not.
All right.
Want to wait a second?
Yeah, we can give it a minute, see if any questions
We're
pop up.
very thorough with our information.
All right. Well, if you think of anything that you're not thinking of at the moment, feel free to reach out to Michelle or I or anybody in our office with questions that you may have. Thank you all for your time today. This webinar will be posted on our website in the next few days or so. Give it a week, says Paula. And again, thank you for your time today. Hope you have a great afternoon.
Goodbye.